don't think it's controversial to say that DBD's been going through some challenges lately. Ever since the Walking Dead release in patch 9.1.0, DBD's been struggling to catch a break. The absurdly buggy patch release, combining with the spectacular immolation of the Chandler Riggs livestream, brought the tone right down after a broadly positive anniversary chapter. But if I'm honest, I think the whole year's been pretty lame for the most part. We've seen chapters pushed back, 2 of the year's 3 killers pushing the boundaries at dual power creep, and I'm still reeling at the absurdity of Michael Myers being given a dash, even if it kind of worked out in the end. And that's just the stuff that made it to live servers. Every PTB has seemingly had something that had to get thrown in the fire this year. Who can forget those artist changes that almost killed her few usable add-ons, or the Xenomorph and Night changes that almost killed the characters completely? But by far the biggest bullet we dodged was patch 9.2.0's enormous spree of base game changes to tunneling and slugging, which definitely came from the right place, but were far too overzealous by giving survivors the Mario Kart Superstar off hook and punishing killers for basically any game actions whatsoever that might result in them winning. The reaction was so thermonuclear that Behaviour had to announce the changes were being shelved before the PTB was even over, and brought back with a new coat of paint in a future PTB. A future PTB that's here right now. 9.3.0 has arrived with a remix of the anti-camp, anti-slug and anti-tunnel systems, with the goal of being less handholdy, and the first impressions of a lot of folks is, honestly, more negative than I expected. I'm going to break character here by saying something controversial, because of course I've never done anything controversial before in my life, because I think a lot of people are overreacting to the size of these changes and the gravity of them. That does not mean I don't think the issues that are being called out aren't extremely serious and meaningful, but rather more that I think this PTB is a very mixed bag. There are a lot of successes that are not being acknowledged here, and a lot of failures worth acknowledging too. And most importantly, it leaves Behaviour with a choice that will determine the future of this game's maintenance and possibly even its lifespan. Welcome, friends and foes, survivors and killers, to patch 9.3.0, and the choice that could change Dead by Daylight forever. Oh, if anyone doesn't know, this is Cassie, by the way. She's my little baby super dwarf reticulated python. She's like 5 months old, and she's extremely cute, and she likes her microphone, apparently. Cass, we're using that. Do you mind? But before we find out what that choice is, let's go over the unambiguous changes. The ones that are obviously good or obviously bad. And we'll be starting out with something great that I've been wishing for a while now. I've already talked about it recently on my channel, and if you're looking for a clue, I'm playing her in the B-roll. Skull Merchant got buffed this patch, and I'm a very happy boy about it. I'm not going to dedicate too much time to talking about her here because I've already made an entire video on the buffs that she's getting, and everything is more or less exactly the way I anticipated, and I don't have to eat a mouse, which is nice. The buffs don't meaningfully make her stronger, but they do make her feel much smoother, and provide a good foundation to build her rework on top of. Just like I said in my video. In the short term, unbind undetectable from the power cooldown so that the two can be balanced independently, and in the long term, integrate stealth mode and the drone buddy system into the existing power now that the lock-on system is pretty much perfect on the PTB. Merchant still needs her rework, but she needs it on the level of Knight or Doctor, not Freddy or Myers. Behaviour, your foundation for this killer is super strong, just build the rework on top of it and bring it home. You can do it. There are other great changes too. Custom scratch mark colours are the biggest quality of life improvement the game has ever seen for colourblind players, anti-hemorrhagic syringes and especially septic agents ate absolute shit this patch, and killers are getting more blood points for hooking and especially unique hook actions. These are broadly great changes, the kind of things that needed to happen regardless of the rest of the PTB's contents, and as soul-crushing as it probably will be to get sprint bursted into a blood rush sprint burst into a syringe sprint burst, I would rather have that than the same survivor sprint bursting twice and then being fully healed by the time I catch up to them. Although, maybe you could buff the new Styptic. It's quite bad. The new Babysitter off the record and borrowed time seem great too, lining up with the upcoming anti-tunnel changes to give you options that all feel like they have their place in different builds. But for every great change, there's some that seem just extremely questionable. So let's talk about Furtive Chase, because killers are getting a level of base kit bloodlust when unique hooking a survivor. Furtive Chase haste would become redundant and possibly quite oppressive if stacked, apparently. So the perk got changed back to its old terror radius shrinking functionality, except now it applies to a terror radius 24/7 rather than just in Chase. On paper, I like this change a lot. An incremental stealth perk that could work with Monitor on killers with a 24 meter terror radius, and you've basically got the haste base kit, so everything's fine, right? Well, first of all, the Bloodlust off hook goes away on using your power, which was partially the point, so that killers like Kaneki, Spirit and Singularity can't cheese it. But Furtive was often used on killers like Unknown to let you get haste off teleporting, now that utility is just gone. You can't get it from Furtive because it no longer applies the haste, and you can't get it from the base kit because it goes away on power use. This feels bad for the people who use Furtive on teleport killers, but what feels way more objectionable to me is how the decreasing terror radius size is calculated on the new version of the perk. Originally, Furtive Chase's TR reduction was flat, 4 meters per token, but with the change it's going to 10% of your terror radius per token, meaning 3.2 meters for most killers, 2.4 for Skull Merchant, Pig, Ghostface and the other 24s, and the standard 4 meters for the killers, given 40 meter terror radiuses to balance out their mobility, like Blight, Billy and Kaneki. So the base kit system was changed to not benefit S tier killers, and that resulted in a Furtive Chase nerf that made it worse on most of the killers who used it, but stronger on S tier mobility killers. What an arse backwards result. A lot of these perk changes around the new system show similar oversights. Breakdown was changed not to break the hook you're put on for an entire geological epoch, but to compensate the survivor unhooked also gets a personal will make it, that stacks with actual will make it, and Resurgence, and Botany, and Desperate Measures, and Do No Harm, and medkits, and all the other healing steroids that have been drip-fed into the game over the past year or two. Same thing with Wicked, a perk that was niche but powerful in its niche, but has since gotten buffed to the point that it can pull you off a hook healthy when paired with Resurgence, as if you needed more reason to run Resurgence. However, what's really damning about the content of this PTB is not so much what's on it, but rather what isn't. The mid-chapter was advertised as prioritising bug fixes, and admittedly that plan probably had to change with the anti-select all adjustments being pushed back, but that probably should have been communicated better. There are quite a few bug fixes in this patch, but nowhere near enough for what was advertised as basically the great big bug fix patch. How Marza still has her game-breaking movement slowing bug, Skull Merchant, a killer who got changed this update, still has her drone deployment bug from the initial Sinister Grace patch, and notoriously buggy killers like Twins, Plague, Bubba, and Twins again, just for emphasis, still barely function. Even Knight, a killer who got bug fixes this patch, wound up with even more new bugs in the process that are arguably worse than his live state. Skull Merchant's buffs aside, the killer maintenance in this patch has been pretty poor, a fact that has rankled people when combined with the biggest change in this patch, the anti-tunnel, anti-slug and anti-camp coming back for a second go on the PTB. To its credit, these features are much more reasonable than they were on the 9.2.0 PTB. Behaviour aren't going to come and prise your kneecaps off with a crowbar if you double hook a survivor one time, and a lot of the worst elements of the unhooked protections like Killer Instinct being blocked have been wound back too. And there's a lot to like here. Giving survivors basically complete protection of hook means that getting farmed by your teammates is far less damning, and is the biggest success of the PTB in my opinion. The anti-slug system has made a return as well, 120 seconds to pick yourself up now rather than 90, and it ramps up with more survivors being slugged, and this system is quite a bit healthier than the one they did in 9.2.0. This is the most successful take on the base kit Unbreakable they've done so far, especially since Breakdown got changed as well. But that doesn't mean it's devoid of problems, far from it. It still has issues with perks like Flip-Flop Power Struggle, where a short period of a teammate hovering a pallet save can force a system to activate. And if you down yourself with Plot Twist, your time on the floor definitely shouldn't charge this up. It's just got several oversights, some of which are also called background player. And the Breakdown change was welcome, but we need a lot more than just Breakdown change to accommodate these new systems. And there is no better example of this Collateral Damage than what just happened to Pinhead. Pinhead got a couple of changes this patch. Original Pain got reworked and now no longer Deep Wound Survivors, which is great. It's an add-on that was basically only used Tunnel Through Endurance, so reworking it is long overdue. Even though the rework is just greasy black lens again, for some reason. But there is a second change. Pinhead's chains can no longer attach to survivors with endurance. This creates a couple of problems when you realise survivors get 30 seconds of super endurance off hook. A survivor off hook can still run through and break chains for their teammates without risk, which is a problem when the power cannot affect them. And more concerningly, this disruption prevention completely shits on the lament configuration as a thing. If someone gets off hook and decides to hop on that box, Pinhead cannot chain them to cancel the solve. The only way he can interact with that power at all is by teleporting to the player who solved it. That player who is immune to his power, running at 110% speed, has endurance, has elusive, possibly has multiple anti-tunnel perks as well to protect them on top, because there are at this moment no power interactions that count as conspicuous actions, and no anti-tunnel perks got nerfed this patch, and this brings me back to an issue that I had with the original 9.2.0 changes. With how powerful the base game anti-tunnel and tunneling perks are, there has never been a greater need for some killer power interactions to be considered conspicuous actions, so that the corner cases like the lament configuration problem don't cripple some killers completely. Let me just play the bit from my last video on the topic telling my proposed solution. I suggest that we split items into two categories: trial props and killer belongings. Trial props are the tools the survivors use, things like EMPs, flame turrets, jigsaw boxes, first aid sprays, vaccines, and the new lady's weird green mushrooms. Those are resources the survivors use to help themselves and others out, so those can stay the way they are. But killer belongings are the props the killers use to allow their own power to work properly, i.e. bear traps, phantasm traps, drones, demo portals, and the lament configuration. A survivor messing with these isn't just using a tool to survive, they are actively antagonizing the killer and drawing their attention. A trial tool is used to survive, but a killer's belonging is used to disrupt them, and as such, not only should interactions like disarming traps, disabling drones, sealing demo portals and solving the box count as conspicuous actions, this marker indicating that you were the last survivor fresh hooked should disappear, and you should count as a unique hook, even though you're not actually a unique hook. If you feel safe enough after you've been unhooked to disable the killer's power, that's fair enough, you do you, but on your head be it. You should not be protected from the consequences of antagonizing the killer, and the killer should not be punished for turning their attention to you if you start fucking around with their belongings. And here comes the crux of the 9.3.0 PTB. The problem with it is not so much what's on it, but what's not on it. There is no meaningful compensation for the killer side now that survivors have the Mario Kart Power Star off hook, there's no nuance given to situations like the lament configuration or other lose-lose interactions, and there is not enough bug fixes for a patch supposedly prioritising bug fixes. This patch is a slapdash rehash of the 9.2.0 changes that, while far less destructive than that patch was, is still poorly tested, full of damaging edge cases, and really is not what the player base needs at this moment, especially with a content drought coming up in early 2026. But this patch accomplishes one very unique thing that we've never really had before. In terms of gameplay features, Survivor is basically solved now. We have a huge variety of powerful and synergistic perks, on top of an extremely robust set of base kit information, protection and features to help with anything a killer could do that could ruin your evening. Every map has 45 pallets on it, every item is useful, and if your teammates want to go next, they can't screw you over by giving up on hook. They have to DC and give you a bot. Of course, there are improvements that can be made with things like bug fixes, UX features, and better matchmaking, good tutorials, and better DC penalties to punish teammates for throwing your matches. But the actual gameplay of Survivor, the meat and potatoes of the role, has never been more feature complete. For 80% of this game's match participants, there's not really a huge amount of, gameplay worth complaining about anymore. Is that not a really, really good thing? Is it not something that we should aspire to for everyone? Because now we have the unique opportunity, one that we've never really had before, to take a hacksaw to the Survivor meta. Hey Cassie, what you looking at? and give struggling killers some serious firepower without risking upsetting things too much because the core of Survivor gameplay is finally rock solid. Hell, much more than rock solid. It's idiot-proof. Let's use a couple of examples here. We're going to live forever and shoulder the burden. What's up, Cassie? Yeah, you really want to get in the microphone, don't you? You really want to do that. Well, you can't. It's my microphone. We're using that. Wiglif is a crazy fucking perk. At what it does, it is completely insane. By all accounts, it is too good, and gives too much slug relief pressure for the little you have to do to actually use it. It should be nerfed. It stacks too well with other healing perks, while also just being far too valuable on its own for a single perk slot, but it will never be nerfed, because it is an anti-slug perk, and survivors allegedly need more anti-slugging tools in their arsenal. Same with Shoulder the Burden. The perk is totally fucking insane for anybody with a pair of eyes and like a monitor, and it's not suitable for use against almost any killer because it's just too much of a game changer, with too small cost for using it. But they're not going to meaningfully nerf Shoulder the Burden because it is an anti-tunnel perk that provides an incredibly valuable and unique tool, one that Behaviour is convinced survivors desperately need. But if powerful anti-slug and anti-tunnel tools are integrated into the base kit, there is nothing stopping these perks from getting the more aggressive treatment they clearly deserve, because servers will always have powerful base kit options to fall back on. There are a lot of perks that fit into this category. Wiglif, Shoulder, Reassurance, Unbreakable, Plot Twist, Duty of Care, Conviction, arguably Decisive Strike, Camaraderie, and Blood Rush too. Hell, you can even take a proper look at balancing the stronger exhaustion perks like Lithe and Sprint Burst around the fact that the consequences of a fast chase are less pronounced than they were before, so chases extended by these perks can have their average duration shortened. You don't need to worry about finding a way to side grade these perks like they did with Breakdown or Wicked in ways that might create more problems. You can just nerf them, knowing that the Survivor base kit is powerful enough that these perks do not need to be as powerful. Same thing goes for perks that encourage problematic playstyles or lose-lose scenarios like Background Player, Deliverance, Resurgence, and Flip-Flop Power Struggles combo. Survivors have a strong base kit, meaning you can reduce the power level of problematic perks or perk combos easily and aggressively, without leaving survivors high and dry without the tools they need to survive. Don't get me wrong, the 9.3.0 mid-chapter is terrifying, overzealous, and will still likely make Killer pretty miserable for a little while. I see a lot of people catastrophizing about the longevity of the game, and while I do understand why, this is a major system change that will affect every single match of Dead by Daylight, it isn't like DBD being survivor-sided is anything unusual. Throughout most of DBD's existence, the game has varied from slightly survivor-sided to very survivor-sided, with brief breaks for killers to have their time in the sun, like in the Call of Brine Eruption meta, or Painres DMS at full strength in Artist mid-chapter. DBD being survivor-sided is fairly normal, and even if 9.3.0 comes to life with no changes, it'll be far from the most survivor-sided DBD has ever been. I played more than most did on the 9.3.0 PTB playing Skull Merchant, a killer who may still be DBD's worst. If you ask me if I'd rather play on that patch, or the Circle of Healing meta patch, or the Made for This meta when every map had an infinite on it, or old DF before the conspicuous action change, I would take 9.3.0 every day of the week. It will be a pretty damn survivor-sided meta, but we've been through worse. Not least because during these unhealthy metas, all the difficult things about patch 9.3.0 were mostly still around, just attached to perks instead. Wow, Pinhead's gonna get punished when survivors off hook interact with the box. Yeah, that is going to suck, but that's literally already true with Off the Record and DS right now. What's this? Weak killers who need a tunnel or slug to turn a game around will eat shit to the new system? Were they not already doing that to the million powerful anti-slug and tunnel perks that you could just run? Shoulder the Burden, Wiglif, Conviction, Blood Rush. Yeah, M1 killers didn't care about any of these until the new patch dropped, right? Don't get me wrong, the new patch makes a lot of these problems worse, but they were already issues that needed to be fixed, and now they're much harder to ignore and much easier to fix because the Survivor has a stronger base kit. There has never been a better chance for the balance team to give these perks the treatment they've long deserved. I could see a world where 9.3.0 is a horrible patch in the long term of DBD, where it marks another step in the decline of skill expression in this game and paves the way to its eventual undignified demise. But I could also see a world where Survivor, being effectively feature complete, sees 9.3.0 mark the start of something brilliant. A major overhaul to the killer role, fixing issues that have been plaguing killers for years, while Survivor players sit comfortable knowing their base kit will remain viable and solid. Hello, Cassie. Want to get up here? In the long term, it could be the best or worst thing DBD does this year, depending entirely on how the changes are followed up in the long term. Which leaves one very simple question. Do you trust Behaviour Interactive not to fuck this up? I'll give you a while to think about the answer to that question. Perhaps I'm kind here when I say I'm not sure, and I don't blame you for completely distrusting them. But if they would determine not to listen, we'd be playing on the 9.2.0 PTB live patch right now, and the game would be on fire. We'd be getting our gens block every time Jesus blinked. So clearly they are willing to listen on some level. In any case, I don't think we have much of a choice in the matter, as to whether or not behaviour can be trusted to not fuck this up. But what can we do except provide clear, unambiguous feedback about the direction 9.3.0 is taking and what can be done to follow up properly? As you might expect from Captain Opinionated, I do have some opinions about the priority steps behaviour needs to take for 9.3.0 to feel like a new beginning for the game, rather than the beginning of the end. She really wants to get on the microphone, but I can't let her do it. It's being used. You have anything to add, Cassie? Do you have anything to say? Okay, you say you want to get in the microphone, but we need to stop that from happening. Come on, little miss. That's not okay. Okay, she's in the microphone. Might leave her in there to see how it affects the audio quality. Hey, Cass. What's up? I see. Very well. Let's start with stuff that has to happen immediately. Clean up edge cases and the conspicuous action system as a whole. As you've already established, Pinhead is directly and significantly nerfed by killer powers, not working with the conspicuous action system, and other killers like Trap Killers and Demogorgon suffer as well. So if base kit and tunnel is going to be this good and last for this long, killer interactions that encourage the killer to interact with the user need to be considered the killer's belongings and thus count as a conspicuous action to use. Talked about this before in my video on 9.2.0. If it's an item that you use yourself to help you survive, like a jigsaw box or a Wesker spray, it counts as a trial prop and thus doesn't count as a conspicuous action. But if it's part of the killer's game plan that you are fucking with, like traps, drones, demo portals, springtrap cameras and doors, and the lament configuration, those should be counted as killer belongings, the kind of thing that you shouldn't be using if you don't want to draw the killer's attention to you, and thus should be conspicuous actions. This is necessary for the killers affected most heavily by buffing base anti-tunnel to this degree. Once that's done, there needs to be a protracted and sustained effort to enable and reward healthy gameplay from killers and ensure they have the agency and options to succeed as often as possible. Oh yeah, and here's one more very stupid thing I forgot about while filming. You know how the match details and pause menu are now on different buttons on the PTB? Well, let me just play the bug report that I put on the forums and sent to Behaviour about a issue with this new feature. Okay, so my power button, the one that I use for my secondary power, so that's my, like pulling up my Skull Merchant radar, for example. On live servers, I have that on tab. The default for that is control. But if you actually play the game, you'll notice that the tab button opens up the match details. And I cannot rebind, as far as I can tell, I cannot rebind that button. I can't, like, rebind the match details button, and it will not let me bind my secondary power button back to tab. Like, I try this, and it puts it back on control. So, yeah, this update has fucked with my inputs, and unless I'm missing something, like, there's a button that lets me bind it back, like rebind the match details button. I now can no longer use the keyboard input that I normally use for my power, so that's actually really annoying. Thanks, game. Killer basically needs the level of attention that Survivor has been getting for the past several years, and that needs to start with more bug fixes and more add-on passes. On paper at least, Survivor loadouts are looking pretty diverse right now, and of the 7 item types in the game, all 7 of them, yes even fog vials, have good uses and reasons you'd want to bring them. Most killers are lucky to have 7 viable add-on choices out of 20, And for a lot of killers, that could be rectified without too much difficulty. My mind jumps to Pinhead, Twins, Spirit, Deathslinger, Artist, Unknown, Knight's garbage very rare aura reading add-ons, Houndmaster, we all remember what you did in Knotted Rope, you monsters. But more importantly even than add-ons, you need to get on your bug fix grind set ASAP. This mid-chapter had slightly more than your average supply of bug fixes, but DBD has way more than your average supply of bugs right now, and has been since Unreal Engine 5 dropped last year. Numerous killers become incredibly unappealing to play solely because of their bugginess, and some of those names might sound familiar. Houndmaster, Artist, Knight, but also Wesker, Bubba, Nurse, Plague, Huntress, Skull Merchant because you still didn't fix her null deployment bug. Hell, Twins and Blight have bugs that are now old enough that they are legally required to attend school in England and Wales, and they both need further maintenance anyway. Blight could do with some nerfs, and Twins could need some compensation, or like a mini rework after these slug changes hit, so some bug fixes at the same time would go a long way to improving the killer experience at no cost to the survivors. But encouraging, enabling and rewarding healthy gameplay needs some actual balance adjustments too, and for this we need that hacksaw to the meta I was talking about. Now that survivors have a solid and reliable base kit, we have the wiggle room to start nerfing survivor perks that are too strong but also too essential to game health to nerf, or reworking perks on both sides, but mostly survivor, that encourage gameplay to degenerate or come to a halt altogether. If the devs want to punish excessive slugging, reworking blindness, flip-flop power struggle and background player, and adjusting sabotage speeds would be a good start. If the devs want to discourage tunneling, you need to look at changing perks like Deliverance and other self-unhook perks, as well as monitoring healing speeds carefully. Because if survivors are resetting so easily that splitting pressure is worthless, the killer will go to the one place they're guaranteed to find an injured survivor: back at the hook. We've seen a lot of killer perks nerfed or completely reworked because they make the survivor experience unintuitive or miserable, like Pentimento, Knockout and Deerstalker. It's time to do the same thing to more killer perks and to survivor perks if we want to make killer as smooth as survivor is now. And the last thing is something that Behaviour is actually already doing with a lot more frequency than they used to: meaningful maintenance to struggling killers who are failing to keep up with the meta changes. Think of the kind of meaty buffs that Nemesis got a little bit ago, where his hinder became like numerically relevant, or these Skull Merchant changes currently on PTB right now. These are the kind of things lots of killers could be getting to just give them a fresh coat of paint. If you're looking to give a struggling killer something more substantial, I suggest tying it to the unique hook system since that's integrated into the base game already. Maybe for Trapper, an available trap teleports into his inventory on a fresh hook. Maybe Doctor gets a free static blast, or Dredge gets some bonus Nightfall progression, or extension to a Nightfall that's currently active. You've got the system to track playing like a good boy now. Use it to buff the killers who struggle to win while doing that, by rewarding them directly with something useful tied directly into their powers. You don't need to do it for everyone. I don't think Blight or Ghoul are going to miss it, but it's a new balancing angle that you have that's tied specifically to killers playing the way you want them to. I know all of this is a hell of a lot of work, basically an entire year or more's worth of design efforts going towards this killer revitalization initiative, but that's the scale of the problem that we're facing now. You don't just get to queef out a patch like 9.3.0 and expect things to just sort themselves out. You've taken a meta where survivors already have so much and thrown gasoline on that fire in the name of health, and while you weren't necessarily wrong to push for that increased game health, Killer has been feeding on scraps for quite some time now, and this is a breaking point. An incredibly easy one to foresee, and one you absolutely cannot afford to allow to linger for too long. 9.3.0 is a patch with potential, but it also is a patch with problems. Wait, hang on a minute, it's got a ring to it, maybe someone should use that. A lot of people are incredibly upset at such a seemingly tone-deaf patch, and I don't think they're wrong to be, but I also think with correct follow-up, we could be waking up to a DBD that's healthier than ever in a year's time or so, wondering why we were ever so doubtful. Behaviour, after the January chapter comes out, you have 6 months with no new killer until the 10th anniversary chapter in the summer. It'll be one of the least busy times in your calendar. Never a better time to get to work on fixing these issues. There's a lot to do, but it's worth a shot. Otherwise, well, at least you buffed Skull Merchant.